Good afternoon, Minister, if you like. My name is Neil Chantler, and I'm counsel for the Chinese-Canadian Concern Group. Are you comfortable with me asking my questions in English?
Oui, tout à fait. Je vais répondre en français, mais ça me fait.
Of course, I'll answer in French, but I'll be happy.
My headphones
J'aime
on.
mieux faire mon témoignage en français.
Put your headphones on.
Okay, thank you.
I'd prefer answer in French.
I'm going to start by asking you about an issue that you only touched on briefly with your evidence today, but I know it's something that you have a lot of experience with, and that is China's interest in the Canadian Arctic. And perhaps I'll start just with a general proposition. Would you agree that China's interest in our Arctic is part of a much broader strategy of geopolitical influence and control? And it's very much connected to the issues of foreign interference in our democracy that we're here exploring in this inquiry.
I think that the Arctic issue is wider than that. I think China for a long time has been trying to become an official member of the Arctic Council, where Canada, with Scandinavian countries, the United States, and Russia are members. I'll go back on that. The other thing is that China declared itself being a near-Arctic state. So a state which is near the Arctic, which we will agree that it is absurd. And what happened is that with the invasion by Russia of Ukraine, the Arctic Council stopped its operations politically. There were no political meetings between Canada and the countries, Scandinavian countries, United States and Russia. Finland and Sweden joined NATO, so essentially the 8 countries that were part of the Arctic Council, the 8 Arctic countries, there are 7 that are part of NATO. And what is happening currently is that Russia, which in the past did not want to look at China as involved in the Arctic, Russia is working a lot in Ukraine, depends a lot more on China, and allows China to be more involved in Arctic issues, which is an issue in itself. So that's why Canada is working on a new strategy on Arctic that I hope I'll be able to talk about in public in coming weeks. And at the same time, our goal is to clearly work with Arctic countries that have common interests with us. Of course, the United States and Scandinavian countries, to ensure that we protect the Arctic and that in the end we be able to have decisions linked to the Arctic taken by Arctic countries in compliance with our international laws. As your question, if foreign interference is being done by China related to the Arctic, I think your question is too wide, and I would need to have more specificity on what you want me to answer on. I'm just giving you general context on what I think of China and the Arctic.
I have other issues to cover, and I'll move on given the time.
Okay.
Could the court operator please pull up COM 363? This is the NCCOP report at PDF 26, paragraph 37. You'll see the heading, Exploiting Ethnocultural Communities. I don't expect you've read this section recently or in any detail, but essentially this section talks about foreign states. It says, in the period under review, foreign states sought to exploit cultural and linguistic ties with ethnocultural communities and groups in Canada. And it goes on. If we scroll down to PDF 28, paragraph 40, this describes the involvement of Chinese diplomatic staff in influencing community organizations. And the sentence that starts with "these organizations" in the middle of paragraph 40 often have close relationships with the PRC embassy and consulates and may rely on financial support for their activities, may benefit from reciprocal favors, including financial and economic incentives or other honors and awards to cooperate with PRC authorities, or may simply support the PRC because of a sense of national pride. Now, a few days ago at this inquiry, I had officials from CSIS agree with the findings of the NC COP report in this regard. And I recognize that not all activity between community groups and diplomatic staff constitute foreign interference. But is this type of foreign interference activity on your radar as Minister of Foreign Affairs? How concerned are you about it, especially when it comes to activities community organizations are involved with around election time? And have you engaged with the Chinese ambassador on this issue?
So first of all, of course, the report is important. It speaks for itself. And I think that there is interference. We've seen it in the Zawi case, and sometimes there's influence. Currently, while we speak, I have no recommendations from my department to send back Chinese diplomats, have them PNG'd, as we say in English, and to send them outside of Canada. I think that the work of shedding light on this is fruitful. And why? It's because we're giving many signals that it is unacceptable. I think that we're the country in the world that is projecting it the most. So to your question, did I discuss with the ambassador? I'd say I've had better than that. I've had several conversations with his boss, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, during my visit in China, like I said earlier in my testimony.
And what has the response been? How are they reacting to these allegations that we are making against China, the role its ambassador and consular staff are playing?
Votre question est très pertinente. Puis vous allez...
Your question is relevant. You will not have any surprises. You won't be surprised by my answer, but it's been denied every time. So if he denies it officially and unofficially, it doesn't mean that their behavior will not change. So that's why we have to shed light on the issue, and that's why we have to work with other countries in the world to be able to have support, to put pressure, to exert pressure, because Canada cannot always by itself put enough pressures on China. The more countries are together, the more pressure can be exerted.
Thank you. My next issue is in regards to the Chinese overseas police stations. Could the court operator please pull up WIT 148? And I apologize, this is the English version of your interview summary. Page 9, under the heading Chinese police stations, paragraph 31. Here you say, you noted that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police is currently investigating the matter. GAC has also taken a series of steps with the Chinese embassy to request that these police stations cease operating on Canadian soil.
Yeah.
Now, you were interviewed by Commission Counsel on July 5th of this year. At least as of that date, those stations were still operating on Canadian soil. Is that what we're to take from your evidence?
What I would say is that when I learn through the Safeguard Defender articles that there are police stations, Chinese police stations in Canada and elsewhere in the world, what I do is not only I ensure that measures are taken by us diplomatic measures by our department, but I also ensure to talk about it at G7 because Safeguard Defenders is showing that it's not only in Canada, they are present in other G7 countries. I also talk about it at the G20. I also talk about it at NATO. Even though it's a military alliance, it's not necessarily relevant, but it's to talk about what is happening, our relationship with China. And what I also do is that I decide to use my toolbox, my diplomatic toolbox. I ensure that I refuse the setting up of new stations, new positions in the Chinese embassy, and I refuse a visa. I deny a visa to a Chinese diplomat in Canada. So that's how I show, whereas the RCMP is still doing its investigating. And obviously, I raised with the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the G20 the issue of those police stations, those Chinese police stations. Politically, they've always denied. But you've heard, I think, that diplomatically in the department, even though officially, politically, they're always denying that we've received departmental information saying that those police stations were not operational in Canada anymore. So for us, they admitted that they existed.
The discussions are ongoing, I take it.
Non, ce que je viens de dire.
No, what I said is that diplomatically, they did admit that they were in existence, but that they would not be operational, functional anymore. Us, politically, when I'm talking about the Foreign Affairs Minister, he's always denied it. But the RCMP continues to investigate. But what I can tell you, how can I tell you? My job is not to take care of what's happening in the country. My job is to ensure that China ceases its activities and that there are diplomatic impacts. I deal with diplomatic impacts. Currently, are they still operating or not? That's the RCMP. That's the Department of Public Safety that can give you an answer because I don't have that information currently as we speak.
Yes.
Thank you.
Those are my questions, Commissioner.
Mr. Singh for the Sikh Coalition.